Hello and welcome to the Helping Friendly podcast on tour and live coming at you here at the 2:30 p.m. hour in Mountain Time Zone, the 4:30 p.m. hour in the Eastern Time Zone. And as we do, just filling you in with where we're at this point in America. It's 3:30 Central, 1:30 Pacific, 12:30 Alaska. I'm not going to go backwards in time over to Asia, but it is, I believe, around 4:30 in the morning in Seoul, South Korea. That's really all I can tell you right now based on experience. It's the middle of the day here. We're hanging out. Meg and I just recorded a awesome HFPod bonus episode, and we are here today on Wednesday, March 23rd, 2022, to talk through the 29th anniversary of the third to last performance of Gamehendge ever. 3/22/1993 from the Crest Theater in Sacramento, California, a location that Mr. Trey Anastasio got vastly incorrect the last time they played Sacramento to open their fall 2021 tour, when he thought they just played there 6 years ago. It had been 1996. So a location that has seen some excellent Phish shows, and this show that we are going to discuss here is an incredible one, a really exciting Phish show. I'm very excited to dive into this. Before we do that, though, Megan, how are you doing here today? And I don't want to put you on the spot too much, but
Oh no,
we haven't seen you in 2 weeks. How have you been? How has life been for you?
I've been doing good. I've had some time off work, which is just awesome. And I've been enjoying that. I took a vacation. It was unexpected in many ways, but we're all healthy and together. And I got to see a really cool city. I've never been to Argentina before. I got to go to Buenos Aires and it was amazing. I got to show my kids and they translated for me, which was super cool. They speak Spanish and it was, the first time they've been able to use their Spanish in the real world. And that was super exciting. So we had some awesome moments and hopefully I can go back.
I totally forgot to give accolades and praise to this when you told me it over text. The idea of your kids translating for you in a foreign city, that just in and of itself, it's one of the coolest things in the world. I am so stoked about it. What a promise for a future generation that is able to take their parents who are well educated, who are well traveled, who have lived overseas, and say, "Mom, I got this. I can get us
Yeah.
food."
It was awesome. It was so cool whenever we would have to speak to someone in a store or, a taxi driver, if we didn't have enough pesos and we needed to know if we can pay with US dollars, or if there was children at the pool, the girls were able to engage in conversations with them. It was pretty amazing because, you hear them learning Spanish at school for all these years and you think, are they really learning anything? But to see them use it was so cool. And now they're, inspired. They're like, I have to live somewhere while I'm in college or something and do a year abroad or at least a semester so I can really learn Spanish. And it was really motivating. So it was pretty magical, I have to say. So I'm grateful for that.
That's awesome. So you were overseas in Argentina, traveling and enjoying yourself. I am currently, anyone who watches this show on a regular basis knows that my background is completely different. I'm currently in an Airbnb in Missoula, Montana, where there is no translation needed, although I do speak with a little bit of a country drawl when I'm outside of the town, just because it's just the way it goes. It's gorgeous here. This is my wife and I met in Missoula we went here for college, and it is my favorite place on earth. And to be broadcasting HFPod live from Missoula, just I can see Mount Sentinel and Mount Jumbo out our kitchen window. We've been doing some hiking. We did some skiing. We have been looking at houses, which, who knows what will happen with that in this market. But my goodness, I love it up here. The sun is shining today. It's a beautiful day. I've seen some old friends. It's been very good. But We are
That's
here
so
to talk
nice.
about. It's nice. It's nice.
Yeah.
We are here though to talk about another magical land. You've got Argentina, you've got Montana, and you've got Gamehendge. And we're going to talk today. We're going to step through the portal along with Colonel Fordman. We're going to talk about Gamehendge, our thoughts on the overall story, our thoughts on this show in particular, March 22nd, 1993, and our thoughts on this pressing question that, like, for a long time I thought was the least interesting question. Someone may say still is the least interesting question, but I actually think it's pretty interesting now again, which is, will Fish ever play Gamehenge again? And I have some thoughts on this. I'm curious to hear yours. We are going to talk about all that here in a second. I do want to give everyone a quick reminder who is hanging with us. Please subscribe to Osiris Media on Apple Podcasts for HFPod Premium. We went ahead and recorded an excellent bonus episode here just before this that will be going live towards the end of this week. We've talked about Trey's album, Mercy. We've talked about our favorite versions of Catapult. We have talked about our favorite cities to see fish in. We've talked about a lot. It's been a really cool, fun experience diving into these bonus topics. So please do that. Help support the podcast and gives you some more insight. I also want to have Megan tell us about our phenomenal sponsor here for today's episode, Sunset Lake CBD.
Sunset Lake CBD's line of smokable hemp products are for the old deadhead, like, I don't know, Jonathan Hart maybe, or for the young fish fan, like Ryan Storm, searching for a mellow body high. Smokable CBD has all the benefits of high THC cannabis without the paranoid and anxious side effects. They've got 9 different strains this year's harvest, and there's something for everyone. The Hawaiian Haze is awesome for an outdoor show, and Cherry Abacus is best for the end of the night. All the flower is grown, cured, and trimmed by Sunset Lake CBD farmers. And I have to say, this has really been like a game changer for me, because I never knew really a lot about smokable CBD until I started using Sunset Lake products. And it's really nice. It's really nice to feel like you can relax and chill out, but without getting really high. You know, it's a really like mellow feeling. So I would encourage people, if they haven't tried it, to try it. They also have this really cool farm to table approach, and it gets you really good pricing on premium CBD flower because they ship directly from their farm to your door. And it comes really fast too. They have incredible shipping speed, and their products are great. So check them out today at sunsetlakecbd.com and use the coupon code HFPod, and you get 20% off all your products. So that's Sunset Lake CBD, farmer owned, Vermont grown.
Absolutely. And I want to just say, for regards to Sunset Lake CBD, I had a friend come over and hang out, and we utilized some of the Sunset Lake a couple nights ago, and his response to it was, every time I've ever decided to get high when I had something important to do later in life or later in the day, I always wanted this to be the way that the high went, where I'd smoke a little bit and then I'd be like, hey, I can still do what I want, but I feel relaxed. And he was like, I have not discovered anything like that until today. And that is the magic of Sunset Lake CBD. So definitely agree with that. So we're going to dive into a couple thoughts here about Gamehendge, just kind of in general, and then get into some specifics around the shows where they've played this at, as well as talk about the Crest Theater 93 show in particular. What I want to invite anyone who's watching this to do is share with us. I'd love to have this be an ongoing thing throughout the episode. Share with us if you think Fish will play Gamehendge again, and if you think they should, and give us a why there. Share that in the comments, and we'll share that as we're going throughout the overall episode here. Megan, I want to start with you, though. Tell me when you first came across the Gamehendge myth and what it kind of meant to you from the start, and what your kind of thoughts were as you were becoming a Fish fan.
I don't remember the exact tape, but I know that someone gave me a tape with Gamehendge on it. And this was probably, I mean, it must have been I don't know. I mean, it must have been one of these early ones because I started listening to Fish a lot in 94. I don't think I had heard them yet in 93. Maybe I had heard them a little bit, but I was really listening to them a lot in 94 and saw them in the fall of 94 for the first time. And so I don't remember what tape it was. I'm not good at remembering which tapes people gave me, but I remember hearing it on tape and being like, what is this? And I was a theater person. I did theater
Mm.
growing up. That was my whole life. I went to college for theater. I moved to New York City to be an actress. So for me, hearing Trey's narration and getting this world opened up to me of this story, to me, it felt very theatrical. And I loved that. And was one of the things that really endeared me to this band even more because they just would really go there and take risks in telling this like crazy story. I remember also being convinced that I deserved to hear Gamehenge, but I feel like the more shows I went to, I was like, I deserve this. And then especially when we were in Europe 96, I really felt like I deserved it. I don't know why. It's not like the band asked me to go to Europe. You know, they were doing fine over there without me, but I felt like I had followed the band to all of their headlining shows in Europe. I really felt like at that last Mark Tall show in Hamburg in Germany in 96, I thought, this is it. Like they are going to play us Gamehenge. We all kind of convinced ourselves of that. And, you know, it had been 2 years. Like we felt like this would be a really great time. It
Mhm.
did not happen, obviously, but I feel like Gamehenge is such a magical, mythical part of Fish. And because now they haven't played it in so long, I feel like it's just developed this, I don't know, this really mythical status of just, it's like the unattainable stat, right? Like very few people have seen a Gamehenge set. So
Yeah.
it's a stat that I want.
My first tape was 11/17/94 set 1. And that is a show that I've never really heard many people talk about. I love the first set. But it's not like there's anything on it to like totally blow your mind. Like it's a very entry level set. But within that first set, there's a Colonel Forbin's Into Vibrational Life, Into Famous Mockingbird. And I remember the first time I was hearing it, um, I knew Wilson, I knew ACDC Bag. Um, I think those were the only two Gamehenge songs that I knew at the time. I'd never heard
Mhm.
Tila at that point. I'd never heard the Lizards. I definitely hadn't heard the Sloth. Definitely hadn't heard McGrupp or Forbin's. And so Forbin starts and it's telling this story, and like there's like cues in there that are like referencing Wilson, and they're referencing Iculus, and they're referencing moments that like um are a part of these other songs I had heard that I really liked. You know, ACDC Bag and Wilson were like just early draws for me with Fish. And then it
Mhm.
goes into this vibrational life, and your Trey does such an amazing job in there. You know, the first time I heard it, I was driving through back country roads of Wisconsin. I was 16 and I was like smoking pot for like the third time, you know, so like
Yeah.
everything was new and exciting for me. And I remember just like closing my eyes as he started the narration, which was perfect. And like the music and his narration creates this like image in your mind of you riding this wave and then floating through black nothingness, and then seeing this like realizing the black nothingness is actually this like very isolated object in your vision. And as you get closer, it's not black, it's green, and it's like got it bumps over it, and suddenly it's all encompassing, and suddenly you realize you're in Gamehenge, and like the music goes crazy. And I was like, holy shit, like they said Gamehenge, I think, in Wilson. Like, what is going, there's all these like cross paths, going on for me at that point. And I'm asking older people who are giving me Fish tapes, like, can you explain what's going on? And they're like, oh my God. And someone who finally explained it to me, I was just like, holy shit, like this band is not just a band. Like
Mhm.
they have this universe that they've created in kind of the way that like Pink Floyd did with The Wall,
Absolutely.
or like the mythical nature of like Dark Side of the Moon's mash up with the Wizard of Oz, where I was
Mhm.
like, I got this sense of like the music that, like, my dad has always been the person who's like pushed music on me and like, introduced me to music. But like I always had a sense where I was in like late junior high and early high school that like everything like big and crazy you could have done in rock music kind of ended in the 70s. And I
Mhm.
realized with Fish, like I was totally wrong. There was still so much more to discover. And anyway, I got like the Farmer's Almanac and the Fish Companion at some point. Um, and I, at that point, just started researching and learning about Gamehenge and what like this backstory was, and that's where I came upon these shows. And these were like six of the shows that I like, or five of the shows I searched for and went after as early as possible in my Fish fandom, because I was just like, I need to hear what's happening here. I
Mhm.
need to hear what's happening in this experience. And this show that we're going to talk about, 3/22/1993, was the first show that I heard, the first Gamehenge show that I would listen to. So that's our backstory in terms of how we got into this. Are there any additional thoughts you have from a backstory standpoint?
Not really. I think that's good.
Well, let's jump into it then. So
Mhm.
I want to direct listeners as well, to Undermine season 1, episode 5.
Mhm.
We talked about Gamehenge during that episode. RJ, Jonathan, Brad, and Matt dove deep into Fish in 1987, 1988, and kind of peaked with the 3/12/1988 show, billed as Story Time at Nectar's. This was notably John Paluska's first Fish show, and this was also the first known live Gamehenge, complete with narration between songs from a Grupp through Possum. The show contains the first Fish version of the song Jump Monk, which was not a part of Gamehenge, but is a part of the overall set. And it also has the
Awesome
first known
song too.
versions. Awesome song,
Awesome
and
Charlie
is
Mingus song, yeah.
going to be featured in a conversation that we're going to have in April, because it makes an appearance in one of my favorite Fish shows of all time. This also has the first known versions of Tila and Forbins, although if you go to May 21st, 1988, Trey calls Tila a debut. Antelope, which would come after the conclusion of Gamehenge, contains Dixie teases from Trey. The members of Fish were, by account, at the Frank Zappa concert up the street at the Burlington Memorial Auditorium before the next Nectar's gig, which may or may not have influenced their decision to come home and play their rock opera for the first time ever in front of a paying audience, which also, like I said at the start, happened to be John Paluska's first show, who would go on to be Fish's manager for the next decade and a half. Meg,
I mean,
let's talk
how
about
much
this show.
happened this night? Like this night, there's just it's crazy. It seems like there's already like this mythology with this night. It seems crazy that all of this happened on one night. It just seems like so like what was going on in the universe in Burlington, Vermont that night. Like there was like some serious vibes there being thrown down. Like it's just like amazing.
Yeah, Matt said in the Undermine episode that I love this perspective, that like it's kind of just like a myth building upon a myth. Like the
Yeah.
idea that like all three of these things happened on the same
I
night. Like there's
know.
no way that this is possible.
I know.
Um
But it's kind of amazing. I love it.
it's hilarious. It's one of those things that like it adds to the lore of Fish, though. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and listening to this show, I guess this set is all we have, but it's so interesting. There's like background music playing behind when the band stops and Trey talks, you can hear it sometimes. Not that they're playing, but just like in the bar. And I just kept trying to picture myself in this bar, like when this band is doing this. Like it's just such a leap of faith to do something like this in front of an audience. Like, play something so risky that requires such incredible attention from the audience. I just think this is so awesome that they did this in a bar, presumably late at night, like after the Frank Zappa
Yeah.
concert. So I think it's just amazing to think about being there and what the reaction was. I just can't imagine.
Well, it's a Saturday night, and like, have you ever been to Nectar's?
Yeah, I have.
Like, it's small.
Hmm.
It so I just before we went live here, I got finished eating lunch at a restaurant that used to be like my college bar slash a venue that I would go to.
Oh, that's
On
fun.
Wednesday nights, they would do, you pay $5 at the door and you could drink anything you wanted, as much as you wanted until 1 o'clock in the morning. And these old guys would play like Dire Straits and the Grateful Dead and Dylan. And like, it was awesome. It was called
That's
Wasted
awesome.
Wednesdays. And the place is like about the size of Nectar's. And it's the type of place that like when there's enough people in there and there's enough people like really getting down, it feels like you're playing in front of a stadium type of thing. And Nectar's kind of has that vibe. It's like
Hmm.
small, but like you get enough people packed in there and it feels really big. And you talk about like the courage and like how brave it must have been to like stop in between these songs on a Saturday night in March in Burlington when everyone's itching for spring. And Frank Zappa's playing down the street, and it's cold outside, so why go out for the night? But it's Saturday, so like let's go out and meet some friends and party. And Fish decides to debut this and just see like, do you guys get into this? And it's wild to me that this was not played. Parts of it are played throughout the latter part of the 80s, but they don't play Gamehendge again until 1991. And they won't play a complete Gamehendge again until 1993, the show that we're going to
Hmm.
talk about. This show, it's interesting, the structure here, because it begins with McGrupp, which, as would be featured in later performances of Gamehenge, will be a song that is kind of showcased as the, you know, kind of like the Force Awakens type of period
Hmm.
compared to uh, A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi. It will be like looking back on
Yeah,
what
it's like the
happened.
end.
It's the end. And so they open Gamehenge with McGrupp. They go into then Lizards, Tila, Wilson, Bag, Forbins, Mockingbird, Sloth, and then Possum, kind of this semi Gamehenge song, and then end with Antelope, just a classic Fish song to end with. It feels like a very it's surprising to me, I think, more than anything, that this was not repeated 2 weeks later or a month later. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think from what I've read is that maybe that was because the rest of the band wasn't super into it, that this was kind of Trey's thing. And so, I think that even later on when they talk about maybe recording it, which maybe we'll get into, it seems like that was maybe dropped because the rest of the band wasn't super on board. I'm sure they seem like they all would support each other immensely. I don't mean to say that, but it seems like it was kind of Trey's thing and not necessarily the band's thing. And I think that, at that point in time when they talked about recording it in like around like 93, 94, the band was growing so much. And it seems like they decided not to, in case like, it really came off poorly maybe. But I think this seems more like it was Trey's kind of thing, unless the band, they wanted to go more about like in the direction of growing their catalog and their shows. Who
It's an
knows?
interesting point. No, it's a really good point, because like 1988 is one of my favorite early years of Fish, because it's the last year where you get kind of wild abstract jamming. Um, Before they would really tighten things up in 1989. And you think about, they're just kind of throwing a lot of ideas at the wall and seeing what sticks. And I wonder, in a sense, if like they kind of walked off the stage and were like, I don't know if that's really suited for a live crowd. And I feel like we should use the opportunity in front of an audience to experiment. That
Mhm,
said, there would be 4 additional versions, which we should jump ahead 3 years to 1991, where Fish is playing the North Shore Surf Club in Olympia, Washington, October 13th, 1991, which is about as far from Burlington, Vermont as you could get.
yeah. This show is so interesting because it seems like they kind of backed into this. Like, it doesn't seem
Yeah.
like this was planned. The songs are not really in order, and Trey mentioned something about how the audience is like, is this the one where he's like, the audience is listening so well? Oh no, that's a different
That's
night.
Crest Theater.
That's
Yeah.
Crest Theater, yeah. But this one, it seems like just, I mean, this whole show is played so well. I mean, this is like an incredibly well played show. But I think that it seems like they weren't maybe planning on it. I don't know. That's just the vibe that I get.
I get that too. And it's interesting because this will be the last time until the 94 shows where they will play, like the next one that we're going to talk about, Crest Theater, they play in the second set. They play the Gamehenge in the second
Hmm.
set. Here they play Gamehenge in set one. And you get Jim, Wilson, Reba, and then Landlady. And then you get Forbin's Mockingbird. And from Forbin's through, well, you get Forbin's Mockingbird, Tila, Bag, Sloth, McGrupp. And from Forbin's through McGrupp, you get legit narration in there where
Hmm.
Trey is telling the story and explaining what's happening and catching people up. But there's no lizards. There's no Wilson. There's no possum, which, could be or could not be there. But like you had Wilson earlier in the set, but you don't have it as a part of the Gamehenge saga. It definitely showcases a band that like I almost get a sense from this show that like, well, we're so far from home. Who knows if anyone is actually ever going to hear this? Let's just
Yeah.
clue people into this. You've got to imagine at this point, 5 months from now, they're going to debut the secret language. At this point, they're thinking like, how do we really reel the crowd in with like narration plus also music? And it kind of feels like, let's just cue these people in to the last part of, this saga that we wrote in our last decade. I don't know. That's the vibe I get from it.
Yeah, his narration is really great in this show too. It's he has a cold that night, and I think by like
Mm.
AC/DC Bag, you can hear his voice starting to like wear, but his narration is great, and the playing behind throughout all of these songs is incredible. It's like there's a lot of like textures and flourishes and fills, and it's really beautiful. It's like the rest of the songs from the show too are like really energetic and aggressive. I mean, this is a really tight show. It's really great.
I'm reading reviews on Fishnet right now, and one that I just think is really interesting, just to set the scene of this show, is the Surf Club was a very narrow, long building, which had the effect of making the crowded floor seem very intimate. The
Mm.
stage was so narrow that Fishman's drums were set up behind Trey and Mike rather than to the side as usual, which this is a time in their career where like they played in a line, and at the same time they're not playing on like a universally designed stage that
Mhm.
every place you go you set up the exact same way as you would have set up the night before. And so as a result of that, you get this experience of like, hey, you're playing in a bar, you guys just set up like this. And you get this sense of the band feeling very comfortable, but still being feeling very loose. They're not at home. They're just on the road at this point, and they decide to throw out Gamehenge just to see the reception. It's such a wild moment.
Really cool.
So I want to jump past because we're going to talk in depth about the 322 show here in the second half of the show. But they play Gamehenge on March 22nd, 1993 at the Crest Theater in Sacramento. The other West Coast Gamehenge show, which is just wild that two out of three Gamehenge performances have been out west. This is the only one that happened in set two. But jumping ahead to 6/26, 1994. Do you want to tell us a little bit about this show from Charleston, West Virginia?
Yeah, this one's really interesting because this show's pretty empty, they said, like about a third full, which is pretty interesting. And I think there's a lot of lore about the band punishing people when they skip shows or the reverse, or rewarding fans who don't skip the kind of show off the beaten path. This show's in Charleston, West Virginia. And I think he said they'd only played there once before, but I think it was part of a festival or something. So this is the first time they're ever playing in Charleston, West Virginia, like headlining a show. And oh yeah, I think it was Mountain Stage they had played before. And this is not too long after Hoist came out, a few months later. And yeah, they start with Kung. and then go into llama and play through lizards, Tila, Wilson, bag, Forbin's mockingbird, sloth, McGrupp, and divided sky. I mean, the full set. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, this is essentially what we will hear 2 weeks later
Mm-hmm.
in Great Woods. They will obviously swap out the like Kung vibe for NO2, which we'll talk about. But this is one of my favorite. This might be my favorite Gamehendge show.
Oh, really? Oh, cool.
The Game Hoist show. I remember
I mean,
hearing about this and being like, I have to get that on tape. Like, I have to.
it's crazy that they played the whole Hoist album for the next set too. Like, what were they thinking? I know that afterwards they came off and that second set actually inspired the Halloween cover ideas because they were like, that was cool. We played an album. Like, what if we played another album that wasn't ours, which is amazing. But I'm just so curious as to what inspired them to play this whole album.
I think a lot of it was, and I want to give just a quick shout out to our listener, Stacy Klein, a very loyal listener of HF Pod. I had tickets to the West Virginia show, but I didn't have anyone to drive down with from Mansfield, Pennsylvania. Last
Mm.
time I ever skipped a show because I was solo. I feel your
Yeah,
pain.
totally.
I've had this happen. I tried to go
Hmm.
when I was like 17. I was trying to go to Deer Creek, and my mom was like, "You're not going unless you have like multiple friends to go with," and nobody could. Like I couldn't coordinate with enough people to go with, and so I just skipped it. And like those shows were amazing. I feel this vibe,
That
Stacey.
one hurts.
That's rough. That is truly the band punishing their loyal fans who cannot be at this show. It's not choice.
Exactly.
It literally cannot be. I think to your question, from everything I've heard and everything I've read, they'd been playing the hell out of Hoist throughout the
Hmm.
spring and summer tour. We talked about this when we were talking about Hoist. We talked about this last week when we talked about the 6/19/94 interview, which happened about a week prior to this. And I think it was almost a sense of like, well, we're going to play Gamehenge in set one because there's nobody at this show. And we're just going to mess with our fans and say, why West Virginia, guys, is not far from Pennsylvania, from Maryland, from New Jersey, from even Southern New York. Like, you all can get down
Yeah.
here. You know that we're on a good tour. Don't skip any of these shows. Come to them. You know, we're playing new markets. Show these people that we have a loyal fan base. And so they're going to play something that they're never going to do again, which is Gamehenge in set one. And in set two, play the entire Hoist album, kind of almost as like a tongue in cheek, like we've been playing this all the time. Now you're going to have to deal with an entire set of it, which I love the like already aggressive new material vibe of the spring and summer 94 shows.
Yeah, and this album, like as we talked about during Hoist, it's awesome, and I think that it
Yeah.
really flows as a set really well.
I want to highlight, and I agree. I think that the album flows really well. It was one of the things that was cool walking away from that conversation was the idea that, like, if you think of Hoist as a Fish show, it works really
Hmm.
well in that sense. Um, so the only song that wasn't played from Hoist is Riker's Mailbox because there's no real way to play that live. Although Fish could make a bunch of noise and make it happen. It marks the debut of the Old Home Place, which is really cool and really interesting, which was played acoustic without microphones. It also features the first complete Gamehenge since March 22nd, 1993, which was 134 shows prior, which is wild to think that a spring 93 show was 130 plus shows prior.
I
The
know.
first, these are bust outs that are happening a year earlier. The first tube since April 12th, 1983, 120 shows. Divided Sky also includes Wipeout Teases, and Old Home Place and Amazing Grace were performed without microphones. Really interesting show, really interesting moment in Fish history, which is in some ways eclipsed by a show that is just phenomenal. It was a dinner and a movie show, is now an officially released show. Great Woods Center for Performing Arts, July 8th, 1994. The first set has an complete Gamehenge saga, which has narration between songs from NO2 all the way through Divided Sky. Llama was unfinished as it faded into NO2. Featured Fish, or NO2 has Fish on vacuum. in the second set, which is not this is not the game Rift set, although they open the second set with Rift as a way to almost like jab their fans. Rift contains Manteca teases, does not have the whistling ending. Stash from this show is the Alive One stash, which is one of the greatest tension of release stashes ever. And Flashlight is teased during You Enjoy Myself, along with Frankenstein, which was then played in the middle of You Enjoy Myself. One of the things I love about this show, it was always phrased this way to me. This was a love letter to the Northeast and to the band's original fans to say thank you. We are growing. We are coming back in the fall, and we're going to be playing some big venues, and we are going to be growing as a band. Thank you all for your support over the last decade. Here is Gamehendge for 25,000 people. Just an amazing thing. What are your thoughts on this show?
Amazing. I mean, also, wasn't there Shapiro said he was going to skip this show and go see ARU? And
Yes.
I think Fishman told him, don't do it. We're going to do something amazing. I'm wondering if they were planning on doing something amazing prior to this conversation, or this was like the impetus, like, oh, okay, maybe we should do something amazing. But I loved that backstory. And show's so funny. When this show came out in Dinner and a Movie, my friend who I see all my shows with now, and we've met like as adults, and we met and bonded because we both realized we were Fish fans. And she's one of those people who goes to shows and just completely loses herself and isn't like a stat keeper or isn't analyzing the shows. She's just like there and in the moment. And when this came out in Dinner and a Movie, she's like, oh my God, I was at that show. And I was like, wait, you saw Gamehendge? She's like, oh, I guess I did. And I was like, what the fuck? Oh my God. It's just like, it's so funny that like, you can just realize that that's the joy of being a 1.0, I guess. But yeah, so she saw the show, and this was like a hometown home run for sure. Like this is like a winning game, for the home team. That I agree. This was a treat for the fans. And it's interesting to me that they haven't wanted to do it since then. I don't know. I guess we're going to get into that, but.
Well, yeah, I mean, we can jump into that. I mean, I think the thing that's amazing about this show is that they're playing this in front of 25,000 people. And it's a long first set when Trey includes all that narration, but like the dedication to it and the band's commitment that, hey, we're playing 2 nights at Great Woods. We're going to do one. It's going to have Gamehendge, and then 3 sets of normal Fish, and we'll let loose at that point, which ultimately turns into like 3 sets of pretty outstanding music throughout the weekend here. This is the Friday night show. But so this is the last moment that they ever played Gamehendge. And before we dive into the 32293 show, Meg, do you think that Fish is ever going to play Gamehendge again, and should they?
Yes, I do think they're going to, because they are a band that knows their history and like makes nods to it sometimes, not always. Like it's interesting, when I was reading about this, I read a 2001 interview with Trey where he said they asked if they were going to release Gamehendge as one of the live Fish releases, when they were releasing the first ones. And he said, yeah, I think there's been 2 of them, right? Like the Crest Theater and another one, right? I've never heard any of them. And that just fascinated me. Like he doesn't even know how many times Gamehendge has been played, and he's never heard it. Like, that's just incredible to think that something that means so much to the fans could be something that like, they're not living with every day. Like they're just moving forward. But I do think that they do understand what fans want, and, often give that to them, whether it's more 20-minute jams, turning mic up. They hear what the fans want, and I think they know what this would mean to people. And so I do think that they will do it at some point. I think it will probably be not when any of us expect it, which is really hard because we won't know, and those of us that won't be there will be devastated. But I mean, I don't know. To me, like they've played it at under, shows that were like underattended, and where are Fish shows that are underattended these days? Maybe like randomly in California. I don't know. Yeah. But I also feel like what if like we go to MSG on 420 and like the show starts the first set and it's Gamehendge? Like, can you imagine? Like people would be like sobbing. Everybody would be like emptying their pockets, like putting anything in their mouth that they had. Like it would just be like, I think that it will happen. And I think they should, because I think that it's so special to the fan base and they know that. And yeah, I also think it's one of those things that kind of shows that like a show doesn't have to have a 35-minute Soul Planet or like, huge monster jam to make it a great show. I mean, I do think that that usually means a show is incredible, but I also think that there's so many things that Fish does well beyond that, and I think Gamehenge is a perfect example of that. So,
I think I'm right there with you. I think that they're going to do it again as well. I think I never thought about this. I wouldn't have thought this within the last 10 years, you know?
oh really?
Yeah, I remember when Fish announced Festival 8 and they announced that there's going to be an acoustic set, that people were like, "Oh man, that set is going to have Gamehendge." They announced there was like, well, no, it wasn't announced, but like the truck set, as the truck
Mhm.
came out, like Twitter was like, "Oh, they're going to play Gamehendge or what now?" Trey obviously messed with all of us by saying that they were going to play Gamehenge at Coventry for the
Yeah, that
Encore.
was cruel.
Um, really cruel. There were conversations around Mexico at some point because it's such a, it's a limited show that people are going to go to. Of course, they're going to play Gamehenge here. To me, I think that the perfect setting for it would be when they do these festivals now, they play a 2-set Friday night,
Mhm.
a 3-set Saturday, and a 2-set Sunday night. And that 3-set Saturday has a daytime set that usually starts around like 3 o'clock in the afternoon and stretches for about 2 hours. It's a longer first set. And then they take an extended break and they come back and they play 2 sets of music. And I feel like that set
Mm.
at some point, either the next festival or the festival after that, is the perfect setting because people are relaxed. It doesn't have the same intensity as a
Yeah.
first set at a normal Fish show. It kind of feels in the way that that first night in Mexico, which is just like an elongated set,
Mhm.
feels, where it's like, of course you're focused on Fish, but Fish is also kind of just like a part of the experience. And one way to really bring people in would be to say, here's llama to kick off the show. Nobody's thinking twice about it. And then suddenly we're in Gamehenge and suddenly, everybody's webcasting the show. And it's not a show that like you couldn't be at. Pretty much anyone can go. It's hard for those festivals to sell out. And ultimately they deliver it for the fan base at that point in time. That's my prediction. That's my thought. Someone shares, friend of the pod here, Mr. Greg Knight, host of the excellent podcast, The Great Beyond, shares your vibe, Meg. 420, the man who stepped into yesterday opener that goes into Gamehenge. I like that. I like
Yes, let's
that.
manifest that. No, I feel like honestly though, they wouldn't do it then. I feel like if I'm really being honest, it's going to be at some random show in a random place where they play this incredible first set and they are just feeling it. Like they're feeling it. And that's when they're going to come out and do it. I think honestly, it's probably not going to be at some big show like an MSG opener or like a Mexico show. It's going to be somewhere that they just get in that vibe and it just feels when they want to play Catapult or, this, whenever they feel these like special kind of like tapping into who they used to be moments. So who
Well,
knows?
let's talk about that because that's a very good podcasting segue into the show at hand, which, thank you everyone who's been listening as we've been going through the backstory and back thoughts of Gamehenge. I think we're both in agreement. We think it's going to happen again. We don't know where. I think you make a very strong point that it's not going to be at a heavily hyped show, which is kind of what I was pushing with it being a festival. And I think to your point, part of that is, I'm assuming here, the surprise value, and
Yeah.
also the requirement of the crowd being fully attentive and fully into the show is an important thing, which is what happens here on March 22nd, 1993, at the Crest Theater in Sacramento, California. The only time that Phish has played at the Crest Theater, but not the only time they played in Sacramento. They've played in Sacramento 6 times: 8:30, 92. They opened up for Santana, 3/22/93 at the Crest Theater. Only 5 times, I should say. 9/27/95 at the Cal Expo Center.
Saw that.
11:30. You saw that show. That's a very
Mhm.
famous Dead Arena,
Yes, it was
or
amazing.
Dead Amphitheater. 11:30/96 at the Arco Arena. Incredible, incredible second set. And 10/15/2021 at the Golden One Center, where the Kings now play. But here they were at the Crest Theater, and they come out. Tell me your thoughts, and we'll kind of dive into the first set here. What are your thoughts on this first set, and what were some highlights here for you?
They come out so hot. I mean, they played so well this entire set. It's just really perfectly crafted set list. I think if you listen to this, it kind of builds up at the right times, releases at the right time. Like Uncle Pen is so great right before this incredible stash. I mean, this stash is like has just such an incredible peak. It's insane. And afterwards, Trey thanks the crowd. They must have just been going bananas after this stash because it's really great into like a really beautiful bouncing. I think the whole set list of the first set is just perfect. It's really like really well played. There's just so much texture to their sound. This Reba and the Bowie are excellent, excellent, like perfect 1993 versions. There's so much energy in this first set.
Yeah, it's a very classic Spring '93 first set. We'll talk about this during the 30th anniversary, because March '93 is one of my favorite months of Phish. 2 songs in particular just crushed throughout this month. A lot of songs crushed, but Stash is one of them, and the Weak Paw Groove is another one, as well
Mhm.
as You Enjoy Myself and David Bowie, which we get 3 of those for throughout this first set, or this show overall. But yeah, the Chalk Dust, the Gula, what a classic pairing to open up a Phish show. Stash is incredible. At the end of it, Trey thanks the audience, which kind of gave me my first indication that
Mhm.
he's kind of noticing that the audience is really attentive and that they're really into this. Um, I don't know if the venue was sparsely filled, and that was part of it. It's a Monday night in Sacramento, not really their home territory. Famously, like Phish still can't sell out arenas on the West Coast. Every time I've seen a show on the West Coast, be it the Forum, be it San Francisco, be it everything I heard about the Sacramento show this past year, uh, they don't sell out those rooms that big. So like, I wonder if even at this point, like playing a theater,
Mhm.
they weren't able to sell it out. But Stash is incredible. To me, the highlight of this overall set is the Reba.
Mhm.
I am a sucker for Rebas, but like this one, just reading the jam chart here from fish.net, it's a really fluid and laid back jamming with Trey all but absent, relatively speaking, in parentheses, as if inciting the others to respond. This results in an all but total dialing down of the sound. Not so much a secret
Mhm.
language as a testament to the band, who, via subdued and nuanced playing, managed to maintain the structure of the jam before Trey works through a series of cool rhythmic shifts and wonderful sustain to arrive at the note. That was the vibe I got. It gets so quiet, and yet the
Mhm.
band is like, they could do this thing in 1993 where it was like Fishman would lift his sticks off the drum set, but he was still playing the rhythm. And like
Yeah.
Mike was, his pick was off the bass. So like Page was playing above the keys, so that when they finally went back to their instruments, they were all in unison still. And it's so
Mm.
wild to hear it, especially in a jam like Reba.
Yeah, they're playing so precisely. I mean, it's incredible how fast they can play and how precisely and how tuned into each other they are. And they're really tight.
They're incredibly tight. Any other thoughts that you have on set one?
I don't think so. I think we're ready to move to set 2.
One thing I do want to just point out is the sound check is Haley's Comet, Way, and a cover of Two Princes,
Two
which is
Princes.
that
What's more
like
1993 than that?
like throw that as like a random encore into the show, and it elevates it somehow. Um, so they come out for set two, and I just want to read one of the reviews here from fish.net because it's really great. I was quite lucky to be there that night and quite lucky to be on the rail. The rail at the Crest was unfortunately high, nearly at chin level, and my buddy Nightwing had this little Cookie Monster puppet propped up on the rail so he could tell people where he was. Anyway, Trey launches into the narration of the Gamehendge story, and suddenly the security guard, who had been staring at us blankly for most of the night, gets up from his post, walks over to the rail, pets the little Cookie Monster on the head, and walks across the other side of the stage. Trey seemed to lose his concentration. After the guard petted the Cookie Monster, Trey's jaw drops. He falls silent, glaring at the guard, and walks across the stage. And he says, "I'm sorry, I was just looking at this guy right here," and continues his narration at that point in time. Just to set the scene of being there. But they come out, they open up with Golgi, and they go into It's Ice before using the silent part, the jam within It's Ice, to drop us into Gamehenge in one of the coolest ways. I love the way that they do it on the night of the Great Wood Show, where they use NO2 and the kind of the dentist chair. Like, you really get the vibe like you're going there.
That's very
But
cool.
here you get to use another song that has nothing to do with Gamehenge to give you this sense of like every song could be a portal to Gamehenge. It's wild. What are your thoughts?
I love that. Yeah, I love that how Trey's like, okay, we're under the ice now. And now, he tells the story about what's going on, and it's ice, and he's like, and now we're under the ice and we're looking up at our double, and that's, I haven't had an audience this attentive and quiet in years. He's like, in years. He's like, so we're going to tell you this story. And it's just, I love that they can use, other songs or other imagery, and to kind of, that can become the portal. And you're right, the portal in the Great Woods, though, is pretty spectacular, just because they're doing some amazing sounds behind being the dentist chair. It's just so cool. But to me, this set is like, and this whole show is such a throwback to who Phish was before 1994. Like, they're just this weird band who kind of defies categorization. They played like incredibly precisely, incredibly fast, really inventive music, and also cultivating this audience and rewarding them for good behavior, for like attentive listening. And, we're going to pass a secret language to you. We're going to see if you can pass it on to friends and see how fast you can do it. We're going to tell you this story and bring you into our world. It's just, bands don't do that. And I think this is exactly like why they became who they did. And I just love that this is them rewarding the audience. It's so cool.
It's an interesting point as well. Like, we were talking earlier about the sense of like punishing fans for not being at a show. And hey, we're going to, the Dark Side of the Moon show from 98 is a perfect example of this, where the band was just like, hey, you're not going to show up for this show. You're going to the next show. Like, you guys left Vegas and decided to drive straight to Denver. Cool. We're going to do something that is going to blow all your minds. And there's that like side of them. I remember talking to someone about this in the Undermine season 2 interviews, this idea of Phish is playing this constant inside joke on their fans that their fans can't help but want to be a part of, even though the band will keep playing the joke on you. Where like they will do things to screw with you deliberately because they know that that's going to make you want to be, it's a Stockholm syndrome type of thing with Phish sometimes. You're just like, yeah, whatever you guys want to do. Like, I'm like, screw around with my emotions, screw around with my with my family's finances so that I can just go and see all these shows. Like, do whatever you want, but like when you do that great thing, like, I'm gonna be super happy. But then they'll do these things where they will reward an audience, and this is very much that. And this was one of the things that appealed to me about Phish, was like, when I was into music in the mid to late 90s, I was into a lot of bands that like were getting a lot of like marketing assistance and a lot of radio play, and they felt like they were on the surface, they felt like they were really caring about the audience. But then I discovered Phish, and I was like, well, this band doesn't need any of that. They need the audience. And maybe those bands did truly care about, their listeners. But like for me, Phish needed their audience, and they knew that, and they knew that that was like a push and pull relationship of like, we have to evolve in these sort of ways. So you're going to trust us in terms of what we want to do, what we need to do. We're also going to screw with you, but if you are around enough, and if you really showcase as a fan base that like this means as much to you as it does to us, we're going to give it back to you at times. And this is very much one of those moments where it's, and I doubt this was planned. I have to imagine
Mhm.
this was similar to the Olympia show, where the band almost was like, they walked into this show not knowing that they were going to play Gamehendge, and then during set break, someone noticed like, hey, they're like really listening out there. We should do something, about this. And Trey, realizes, I can tell this story. I haven't told the story in 2 years, but I can tell it now.
I mean, I just love it. And I also think that this to me is one of the reasons why I really connected with the band is because I was super into the Grateful Dead then, and seeing the Grateful Dead in, 93, 94, 95 was it was just so different. They were kind of just this, I don't know, universe that was existing kind of felt to me very separate from the fans. They kind of were they were like, I don't know, they were like gods to me. They were just these giants of music that had just I've been learning so much from, and they had, just completely transformed my view of music. But then I start seeing this band in 94 that's like really looking at the audience and feeding off of us. I remember my first show just being like, I was like row 18 in Grand Rapids, Michigan in this theater, and watching how much Trey looked at the audience. And it was so different from how Jerry or Bobby, like they like look off, and
Mm,
Trey does that, but he was also like looking at us all the time. And like they all just seemed so, I wrote in my journal that night, like they seemed so like blown away that people are so engaged. And I
mm.
felt like that vibe from them. And I feel like that's what they're doing here. They're just like really recognizing that people are so engaged with their music that they want to give them something that's like really that they can just kind of like sink their teeth into.
Yeah, and you get that with Gamehenge, is this idea of
Mhm.
like, all of these songs separately are classic Fish songs. Like if you
Mhm.
hear Lizards, Tila, Wilson, Bag, Forbins, Mockingbird, Sloth to a lesser extent, but still Sloth, and then McGrupp at a Fish show, you've seen a pretty special Fish show. I mean,
Mhm.
ACDC Bag has been played a ton. Wilson's played a lot, but like the other songs, Lizards, Tila, Forbins, Mockingbird, McGrupp, are all very rare Fish songs. And when those songs are played, it's they're playing that, like
Mhm.
something's happening here. I mean, I remember I was at the night three at Dick's, one of my favorite shows, and they open with MoMA Dance. Cool. Sunday night, everyone's just getting into a groove. MoMA's never like a shocking, oh my God, they're playing this right now type of thing. But then they play McGrupp as the second song, and it was this,
Like,
hmm, I think that
hmm.
they're thinking about their set list in a really cool way right now, and they decided to throw that in here in a way that it changes the dynamics of the show almost immediately. Lizards opened up the second set of Shoreline last year, first time it had ever opened the second set, and then it opens the show in Mexico this year,
Mhm.
first time that's ever happened. And you get this sense when they play that song in these unique spots of like the band is really keyed in here. Tila was one of the biggest bust outs for a long time.
Mm.
So like all these songs as songs are huge, huge deals within the Fish community, but then you turn them into this larger narration, and it showcases a band that is thinking on the level of like, 70s prog rock bands, where they're like, all of our
Mhm.
lyrics, all of our songs, all of the melodies, they all have a meaning. They're all going to be tied together. Famously, they use like the interlude music in McGrupp as the interlude music during narrations for some of these Gamehenges. But I want to ask you, like, what does the Gamehenge story do for you aside from Fish lore, if anything?
I think to me it's just a window into Trey and also a window into the kind of past that they are. And when I think about the pieces that came together to form this, like, the poem that Tom sent to Trey that he posted on his dorm room, the Wilson song that, Tom and Aaron Wolf wrote. and to make, kids laugh, and sang to Trey. And he was like, oh, I totally get it. I think about all these different pieces and how they build like such a rich universe and how meaningful it is to Trey and to kind of like the fan base. And I think that it's just one of those like layers that deepens this universe in a way that is, meaningful and also fun and playful. And I think that's what makes this band so fascinating, is because they're still doing that. I think when you think of things like Casbah Vax or Sci-Fi Soldiers, these are, things that they're still inventing because they are playful and they're self-referential, and, that's who they are. And I think that it's just, this is kind of like the first example of that, but I think this totally inspired so much of what happened later.
That's such an interesting way to put it. I really appreciate you answering it that way. Yeah, I think, it's interesting. Like the moral of Gamehenge is kind of a tried and true story. You know, someone comes along, saves a community, and then they become corrupted by what
Right.
saved the community. And this cycle, is unbroken. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. As my history professor used to yell at us whenever talking about 19th century Bismarckian realpolitik, which we can talk about. I mean, I've been going back in the
I don't think I
backlogs of
can
my
talk
mind.
about that. Sorry. I studied acting. I think I told you that before.
I like walking on my college campus has been this like, just, you talk about nostalgia. This, oh my God, I forgot that I learned that. That was an incredible. Anyway,
I
um,
love that.
I applied all history to fish, but the idea of like absolute power corrupts absolutely is this sense of, it's a pretty basic level story. Like, let's be real here. Um, but I think your point about like, it's an insight into Trey, and it's also an insight into who these guys are, is really, it's really true. And like this idea of like a morality story, no matter how basic it is, the fact that the band has decided to write a rock opera that is a morality tale at its root says a lot about who they are as people. And
Hmm.
especially for a band that like didn't really get into political writing until very, very recently in any way whatsoever, and really didn't let their political stripe show. You
Hmm.
kind of knew where they were, but like they weren't really, they didn't show that in any sort of way. To have this be like a centerpiece of who the band is, this morality tale of like good versus evil, good triumphs, but whatever good utilized to triumph ultimately will make them impure again. So like you have to get back to the root of what the lizards, it's an American tale in a lot of cases. And I gotta like say, I went to Vermont in 2016 in the summer, and we were staying just outside of Burlington in this little Airbnb. And I remember walking out, we were staying like kind of on like a tiny farm, and there was a big mountain in front of us. And I remember walking out in the morning and just going, this is Gamehenge. Like literally this
Yeah.
place. And like, have you spent much time in Vermont?
Yeah, I used to go to Burlington actually once a year. I went for like 9 or 10 years in a row. My husband and I loved it. We went in the winter, the summer. It just became, we randomly ended up going there. My husband got, it was like a benefit. He won like plane tickets to Burlington in some sort of sports thing. I don't know. And he, we went and we just fell in love with it. And
Yeah.
so we've been a bunch. It's a special place. Vermont's
It's really
amazing.
special. And like Vermont feels, it feels old world America in a way that like I can't believe is actually real. Like it's hard to get around there. There's like one or two interstates that cross the state. So
Oh
like
yeah.
to get from
Totally
like
been
one,
lost there.
you get lost, and like
Yeah, like
from
your
one
GPS
town
stops working.
it stops working, and like one town to another that's like over a small mountain pass. It's actually like a 2-lane mountain pass that like weaves up this road and then weaves down, and it takes like 35 minutes to go 15 miles. um I remember like my wife and I, when we were there, we were just like, this doesn't feel like, it feels like a European country in some cases. It feels like the vibe that Trey was trying to get to with with Gamehenge of like fears of increasing corporatization, fears of, something evil coming in and taking away what is pure here. The air is clean, the water is good. There's lots of trees everywhere. It's blue, beautiful skies. It's local businesses. All these things are just like make Vermont so special. And I remember just being there and being like, this is Gamehenge. And I think like at that simple root, that's a special thing, even though it's a basic idea in some cases and it doesn't go to like these depths of morality. It's still a really special, simplified philosophy, like from a guiding, a guiding philosophy standpoint.
Yeah, and if you want to write something that's going to mean something to people, it has to be universal. And I think that it, if you think about the great rock operas, like you think about, the Who's Tommy, or you think about Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon. I mean, these are, they're universal ideas, but they're incredible because they're, rock songs that tell a story. And I think that that is not an easy thing to do. If it was, there would be a lot more of them because they're amazing. And that's why I think preserving, this rock opera, because it's not a musical. A musical is like a play or a movie that has, where singing and dancing are like important parts. This is not a musical. It's a rock opera. And I think about how important it is that this is played again, recorded in really high quality, released archivally. Like this is an important part of Phish history and also just an important part of American music. So that's also another reason why I think they should play it.
I think that's a good place to cut it. That's good. I agree. I think that there is something there that like really speaks to where we are right now in history,
Yeah.
and it's a huge accomplishment, and we should the stage should be graced once again with Gamehenge. Any last thoughts that you have on this show?
I don't think so. Just that this is my favorite Gamehendge show
This
as a
one,
whole entire show. Yeah. Yeah. The 32293.
what any reasons why that we didn't get into?
I just think the whole show is amazing. I think
Yeah.
this is the show that I listened to that I kept stopping the most and being like, wow, this is phenomenal, phenomenal show.
I think what's interesting about this show is, I don't think that they planned to do this, and yet they nail Gamehenge. Like
Yeah.
there's no like, oh shit, I forgot that part, or hey, I have to reference back. Like it's told
Mhm.
exactly the way that it should be told. But then at the end of McGrupp, theoretically they could leave the stage at that point and come back for the encore. They give us an incredible Mike's Groove in a period in time where Weekpaw Groove was amazing. This is not a jam chart Weekpaw Groove according to Phish.net, but it's a quality Weekpaw Groove.
Mhm.
There's better ones from the month, but like they're going to give us that at the end of the set is kind of a sense to me of like, all right, we're going to close out the Phish show now that we just gave you that.
Yeah, exactly. We're still not done.
We're still not done. I love that about it. Well, this was awesome to talk through Phish's Gamehenge, talk through our thoughts on it. I, like a lot of our listeners out there, I wish I could see a Gamehenge. I wish I could have seen a Gamehenge. What a special moment to be a part of. I wonder what it would be like to be in the room when they start playing it and Trey
Oh.
starts the narration and the whole place recognizes, like there's something when they start Harpua, but like when
Mhm.
the whole place is like, oh my God. Like I remember reading about when they did the Dark Side of the Moon show, that when they started Time, the whole place went crazy because it kind of signified that we're not just teasing Dark Side of the
Right.
Moon in Harpool, we're going to play Dark Side of the Moon, and that is just something else.
Yeah, that moment, it's going to be amazing when they do it next. I mean, it's going to be after this long, there's going to be a lot of tears.
It's gonna be a lot of tears, and it's gonna be an interesting caveat of living long enough and seeing Phish long enough to see another Gamehenge.
Mhm.
Um, well, we will be back next week as we are every Wednesday. Next week will be our last single episode week. We
Mhm.
are moving forward with 2 episodes a week starting April I believe it's April 2nd, whatever the first, maybe April 4th, whatever the first Monday in April is. We will be back Monday and Wednesday. Lots and lots on the table. We're very excited. Next week, Meg came up with this idea, so I want you to explain kind of what we're talking about here next week.
Well, next week, we're going to be talking about the first ever tweezer, which is so exciting. I mean, tweezer, just this crazily important song in fish history. To be there think about the first time they ever played that song. And then I think we're also going to talk about some other notable versions, right? You have to remind me what the date is exactly. It's like March, I think it's March 28th, 1990. Is that the
March
date?
28th, 1990, the first ever tweezer. They play it at a frat house, which is kind of hilarious. And we're going to dive into that. We're going to talk about the version. We're going to talk about the song's origins within the sound check. And then we'll talk, about like, what did this song that has been with us for only 32 years, what did this song mean for fish and how did it evolve with them? We'll reference back to an excellent version of HFPod from 2017 where they talked through Fish's jamming through the ears of tweezer, but we'll also talk about just kind of what is this song's impact on fish been and what have been some of the notable versions. So that will be next Wednesday, March 30th at 4:30 p.m. Eastern. I'm very excited to be doing that with you as well as with our larger group. And then we will be coming back the following week with episodes on Mondays and Wednesdays. Before we go, however, I do want to remind everyone about our sponsor, Sunset Lake CBD. They are a majority employee-owned hemp farm located just outside of Burlington, Vermont, which we've been talking about. Great place in the world. For years, Sunset Lake was a dairy farm producing milk for Ben and Jerry's ice cream. In 2019, they diversified and started growing hemp for CBD. They embrace Vermont's tradition for land stewardship by using sustainable and regenerative farming techniques to build and protect healthy soils. They are 100% pesticide-free. They use minimal tillage and implement cover crops and crop rotations. They also serve as a research farm for the University of Vermont's agronomists. I think I got that right.
Well done, Brian.
To study hemp and inform best industry practices. We talked about this at the top of the episode. I mean, the products that Sunset Lake provides are absolutely incredible. I've been using them for months now, and I use their salve. Like, I get a lot of tension here in the back of my neck, probably always on my phone too much. I'm just kind of like always relieving tension, if you will. And like, this just helps out in this part of my neck in such an incredible way. Their edibles are so great at the end of the night. Their tinctures, I love putting them in tea. Their smokables are incredible, as we talked about at the start of the episode. So please check out sunsetlakecbd.com. Use coupon code HFPod for 20% off all products. Again, that is sunsetlakecbd.com. Coupon code HFPod. Sunset Lake CBD, farmer owned, Vermont grown. And finally, I will remind you all, please subscribe to Osiris Media on Apple Podcasts, as well as you can become a reefer still. That'd be fun as well. We are posting Fish Premium episodes on a weekly basis, and we're going to be expanding our premium content here into the spring. So lots and lots happening here. Really helps to support independent podcasts, and we greatly appreciate your dedication, and we love spending the time doing this. The more you give, the more that we're going to talk about fish. You know what I'm saying?
Our conversation today got really deep. It was really good. Yeah.
I'm really excited for you guys to hear it.
Yeah. And if you subscribe, you can get all the episodes we've already recorded. So you could hear all of our conversations that you've missed. So please
and all the ones that are yet to come.
I mean, it's so exciting.
I can't wait. Meg, as always, it is a pleasure to talk with you and talk fish with you in the middle of the week here. Thank you so much for your thoughts and your time. This was awesome.
This was so fun. Thanks, Brian. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Thanks for listening, everyone. We will see you here next Wednesday. Have a great rest of your week. Take care of each other. We'll talk with you soon.